So at some point after 8 years, you were recruited into Sea Org.
Yes, I was in 1995.
And so what's that like? Like, I imagine that's everyone's dream, right?
The Sea Org?
No, to become a member of it, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, no, it's not everybody's dream. It's more like this is an analogy, or it's a simile. It's not a straight comparison. But if you look at being clergy in the Catholic Church, you might have your local bishop or deacon, right? Or whatever the terminology is for the local guys, the guys who are operating at the city level, let's say. That's where their sphere of responsibility is. That's the staff members. The guys at the Vatican, that's the Sea Org. They are the hardcore, committed, core element of the religion. Without them, the rest of it falls apart. That's the Sea Org. It's about 4,000 to 5,000 people worldwide. And they deliver all of the advanced materials. They manage Scientology internationally. We were, as a staff member in Santa Barbara, we were receiving weekly orders and phone calls from Sea Org management telling us what to do in Santa Barbara to become a bigger, prosperous organization. Following L Ron Hubbard's policies, because L Ron Hubbard wrote policy letters guiding the organizations on how to deliver classes, how to deliver auditing, how to do sales, how to do dissemination or marketing and promotion, how the building should be laid out, that what offices should exist in the building, that there should be an office for L Ron Hubbard. All of these are policies that L Ron Hubbard wrote. How to do weekly invoicing, how to get somebody started on a course, how to get somebody attested to an auditing service so that they've completed it and you get them re-signed onto their next service. The re-sign line was a big deal in Scientology. It's not just a matter of signing the person up, but then when they finish the service, getting them re-signed onto their next service. This was really crucial, right? You don't just let them walk out the door. You're going to lose 90% of them if you do that. So like all of this stuff is codified in policies. The Sea Org tells the orgs what to do following L Ron Hubbard's policies. They say, hey, take this policy letter, do this, take this policy letter, do this, right? Apply this, do that. They're always trying to tell people what to do, right? Based on their production statistics. And we had to report our statistics every week. And that's a big deal in Scientology. How many, for me, as a course room supervisor, the statistics that I lived or died by mainly was course completions. How many people completed a course this week? And we would work our asses off to get people through their classes, even calling them in to do more extra time on their class. Let's say the guy was scheduled to only come in Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday nights. But I needed that guy to get done this week. So I would call him and I'd convince him, you got to come in Saturday. You got to come in Sunday because you got 16 hours of coursework left, but you're only scheduled for 6. So I need you to come in more so you can finish this week instead of next week because I want you on this week's statistic. And this was how we would run every week. We were trying to get the lines to go up on our graphs, right, of our statistics. How many completions, how much money made, how many people, how many hours of counseling services were delivered this week, how many new people walked in the door, how many new people took a personality test, how many new people signed up for services that week. There are tens, probably about every week, I think we had to report about 120 different production statistics to management. And we would graph these every week. And if the line went up, then we were expanding. We were doing better. And if it went down, that means we produced less than we did last week. And that was bad. And we, needed to hustle and get industrious and produce more this week. And this is why I would be calling people and saying, hey, man, I need you to come in this weekend. I know it's not scheduled, but this is Scientology and this is completions and we're going to make your life better. So you got to get more time in on this course, right? I was motivated more by trying to get the statistic up than I was by trying to help this person, because the pressure to have the statistics going up every week was intense. And mind you, we weren't getting paid shit for this. We were just doing it because we thought we were saving the world, right?
Yeah, Amy, one of our listeners, hi, Amy. Amy says it's like being a Mormon missionary, basically, but basically statistics driven to help advance the organization under the purview of being a volunteer. But really what you are is you're a money-making source. You're a marketing and you're administrating recruitment and development of paying members.
That's exactly right. That's exactly
so
what we were
really
doing.
Is a business.
Yes.
It's just a business shrouded in a nonprofit.
Exactly. It was all about the Benjamins at the end of the day.
It's a business shrouded in religion, but ultimately driven by numbers and driven by revenue.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And income was the most important statistic of all.
Of course.
You know, other things could be going to hell, but if the income was doing okay, then cool, right? And we were in a building that had a mortgage, and we had balloon payments, and we had problems making that mortgage payment, and sometimes it would go defaulting for 3 or 4 months at a time, and we would struggle. And so there were late nights where we were up until, you know, whatever, ungodly hours trying to sell books and sell services and convince somebody to pay us money. And we were always trying to do it in such a way that we weren't making a bad name for the church. Like, oh my God, we're about to lose the building. We're struggling so bad. We need your money. Like, we couldn't say stuff like that, or we weren't supposed to. Eventually we had to, because it was the only way to get money out of people sometimes, is pluck on their heartstrings, if for no other reason. But we were ostensibly trying to sell them more services or more counseling, more hours of auditing. So those were the ways we were supposed to be making the money. And to make the mortgage, just to keep the doors open. We were struggling every month just to keep the doors open. So this was a difficult 8 years for us, right? And after 8 years of it, I was like, God damn, man, I really know further along right now than when I first got here. And instead of looking and being able to take a good, hard, critical look at what was going on, and maybe, just maybe, there was something wrong with this organizational system, and maybe, just maybe, there was something wrong with Scientology itself. I never thought those things. I just thought, I'm not working hard enough. We are not collectively getting the job done here. I want to do more. I really am serious about this. I know that Scientology is the thing that's going to make the difference in the world. We can bring about world peace. We can bring about all these good things. I got to double down on this. And that's what I did. And that's how I joined the Sea Org. And that was 1995.
And what I was trying to get at with my question was, why wouldn't it be every believing Scientologist's goal to want to be in the Sea Org? Because that's the elite. If that's the Vatican, I would just think that would be every Scientology boy or girl's dream. And I don't mean every, because I'm sure different people have different interests. But isn't that the culminating sort of highest sanctioned or blessed status? It's like when a Catholic kid joins the priesthood, the Catholic mom is super proud of their boy, or the Catholic dad is super proud of their boy. Other than the fact that your parents had been abused by the organization, so they didn't want to see you get abused, why wouldn't that be every Scientologist parents or boy or girl's dream to achieve what you achieved?
For many of them it is.
Okay.
But for many of them it also isn't.
Right.
Like, how many people want to, how many parents have other dreams or aspirations for their parents who are Catholic parents?
For their kids, right?
Right? Yeah. They want their kids to go, maybe their kid has an aptitude for science and they want him to go be a biologist, or the kid wants to go be a biologist, or maybe, whatever. And also, of course, many Scientologists used to be in the Sea Org or used to be on staff at one point. And they know what it's like, and they don't particularly want that for their kid. They separate the organizational abuses from the subject itself, right? My parents did. And so they'll argue against going to work for the church because they know that's a bit of a losing proposition in terms of life goals. but they know that Scientology has all these good methods and procedures, and the counseling is really helpful, and you feel really good afterwards. And so obviously it's a good thing, you see. So
in Mormonism,
my
they
dad
say
pretty much said that out loud to me when he was arguing with me about going on staff.
right. In Mormonism, they say that the gospel is perfect, but the church isn't, right? Or
Exactly.
the gospel is perfect, but the leaders aren't. So there's
You
a
got
way
it.
to separate the truthfulness of the theology and the doctrine from the actual members and the leaders even.
Exactly.
It sounds like you had that as well. But
Yeah,
still, for many, it's the crowning achievement. It's like, well, I'm so proud of my boy or my girl. They're actually in the Sea Org. Tell me that's got to be a thing within.
Oh, absolutely it is. Absolutely. Especially amongst the richer, wealthier Scientologists. They're just proud as a peacock that their kid is a Sea Org member and is working, at Flag or is working in LA or doing whatever they're doing. And they want to support them and help them out and all of that. And that absolutely is a thing.
Okay. So what was your life as a Sea Org member?
Okay. The Sea Organization is a paramilitary group that operates 24/7. There is no downtime for the Sea Org. I mean, you sleep at night, but sometimes that sleep is 3 or 4 hours a night. And that can go on for extended periods of time.
What do you mean by paramilitary? What is that?
I mean, uniforms, ranks, ratings, yes, sir, no, sir. How high should I jump, sir? You go through a boot camp process called the Estates Project Force, where you're running around cleaning and doing grounds work and stuff and spending 5 hours a day studying L Ron Hubbard's policies about how to be a Sea Org member. Because there's a whole nother set of policies just for the Sea Org. I mean, Hubbard was, he wrote a lot.
And again, this is his military training that he's injecting into the organization that he has created. And it's his training as a Navy guy. Again, we could just always see how a religious movement grows out of the life experiences of the founder.
Yeah, absolutely. Right? And Hubbard had started the Sea Org in 1967, and it was the management of Scientology, and it was ultimately responsible for delivering the upper level confidential services. That's all Sea Org. I joined the Sea Org and went into management. I went into org management. So I was overseeing the delivery. This is where I went straight to this. I went through the EPF, which took me 5 days because I was already a very educated Scientologist at this point. So I kind of blew through the EPF and arrived on what they call on post. My post was the assistant technical aide for the Western United States. And basically what that means is I was overseeing the delivery of Dianetics and Scientology services for all of the Western United States, which is basically Mississippi River West and including Hawaii, because there's a Scientology org out in Hawaii. So this was the largest Scientology geographical zone with the most Scientologists in it. And so we had high expectations. And my job now was to be the guy at the Sea Org end who received all those production statistics every week and looked at them and analyzed how the organizations were doing based on their statistics. And then giving direction and orders down to the orgs on what to do to raise their statistics, right? We would do analyses and we'd say, okay, well, 6 months ago, the statistics were in a much higher range than they are now. What changed? What's different? What were they doing then that they're not doing now? Let's get them back onto doing that. And that's a fairly sensible approach if that was all there was to it. But there was not. That was actually the least part of my job because the bulk of my job was spent dealing with these insane personnel demands that we would have come down on us all the time as managers to get people into training at Flag, which is the place in Clearwater. They call that Flag, the Flag Service Organization, or there in LA. Like I had gone to training when I was first a staff member. I had gone down to LA and gotten this specialist training, and then I went back to my org so that I could supervise classes. Well, they have constantly, they're putting out these training programs to upgrade or improve the quality of the delivery of Scientology, and they demand that staff members come and get this training. And so a big part of my job was wrangling up people from all of these churches to come to LA or go to Florida and do this training. And there was a lot of heat and pressure on that because these were tiny little pipsqueak organizations. Santa Barbara was, I found out, just one of many pipsqueak tiny organizations that have been plodding along for years, not really doing well, going, the statistics would go up and go down and go up and go down. But if you could look at them on a long term, you'd see they were really going pretty much nowhere. And this was consistent across all of the Western United States. And it was a little eye-opening. I was like, wow, we got a lot of work to do. And I found myself kind of in a parallel position to how I was in Santa Barbara, where I'm working my ass off. I'm working for, as a Sea Org member, the most you're going to make a week is $50. It's a set pay. And
do they cover your living expenses and food?
Yeah,
and
they have that. The $50 is basically pocket change for whatever kind of personal things you need, because you're getting fed and you're getting birthed and you're getting uniformed. It's like living on a military base. Same kind of thing, right? You have a mess that you can go and eat at, and they're not charging you for that food. But sometimes the food is rice and beans. Sometimes the food is bad cereal. Sometimes it's runny eggs. I mean, you're not getting good food. It's food that can be, that they're barely paying for. Because all the money that's coming in is basically, most of it's getting funneled up, and we're not getting to keep most of it.
Yeah.
And I'm now operating in a Sea Org base in Los Angeles, the most prosperous Sea Org base outside of Flag in the world. We're making hundreds of thousands of dollars a week between all the different organizations that exist in those big blue buildings. There's 5 organizations there, and they were each one producing, a few $100,000 a week. But they had to keep the lights on. They had to buy the toilet paper. They had to pay for their food. And a bunch of that money was being sucked up the line to Miscavige land. So we really had drips and drabs left over to pay for our food, pay for new uniform parts. I mean, just as an example, just to kind of set the tone here, I had 2 shirts for about 6 years. That was it. I mean, I kept trying to put in for new shirts and never got the money approved to buy new shirts,
it's like a life. It's like a monk. It's like a life of poverty, really.
Exactly. But the difference is, and this is a really important difference, is that you're not told that's how it's going to be before you go in. When you go become a monk in a monastery, they try to convince you not to do it. I mean, I've looked into this. They tell you, dude, do you know what you're giving up? Are you aware of what your vows actually say and the fact that we're going to hold you to them? Do you know what this lifestyle is like? Do you really want this? And they like really work you over to make sure that you have what I would call informed consent. None of that exists in the Sea Org. You go into the Sea Org thinking that you're going to be making $50 a week, no questions asked. You don't. There were plenty of weeks where we got no money at all. And when you don't have money to get new underwear or socks or any snacks or a pack of cigarettes or something, those are the only little outlets you have anymore for anything personal. You start, kind of life gets a bit robotic and weird. Starts looking really weird after a while. So, so I'm in Sea Org management, 8 years. I'm running orgs. I'm running the delivery of Scientology in the Western United States. That's my responsibility. And I'm working with other people who are responsible for other parts of the organization and what's going on in the Western United States. We were in a basement room, and the way you would communicate with the orgs was through written telexes and phone calls. And it was supposed to only be through telexes. We weren't supposed to be calling the orgs, but we did all the time. And yelled and screamed at them and demanded things because we were getting yelled and screamed at. The environment was very much like a boiler room or a call center. How you see things are constantly like go, 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 go all the time, and there's no downtime, and there's never a time to take a rest or catch your breath or think about things. It's always boom, 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 go, 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 go. And we were always being presented with personnel emergencies or financial emergencies, or some organization was about to get kicked on the street because they weren't making their mortgage payments. Just like we were in Santa Barbara, and they had to get bailed out, or we had to pressure them to make the money. Or sometimes we actually had to go to them and make the money ourselves as the managers, as the Sea Org guys, because the org staff weren't pulling their freight, so to speak, right? And these orgs are tiny little struggling places. They're not big, booming, full of people places. Scientology is not infinitely popular. It's infinitely not popular. So we really had our work cut out for us. And the whole time that I was there, we didn't have, this is 1995 until about 2003-ish is when I was working in management. We did not have any awareness of what the public thought about Scientology, right? We didn't know about Xenu. We didn't know about the bad news. We didn't know about, how we were actually thought of. We were in a very insular, isolated world where we were having weekly briefings and being told how amazing Scientology was. And 6 or 7 times a year, David Miscavige would come out on stage at these big, grand events that we had to put on. And he would tell us all about how great Scientology was all over the world. And we bought it. And we thought, well, maybe we're not doing so great, but everybody else is. So clearly, we're not working hard enough. It's that whole computation that you're running on yourself again. And eventually I burned out after 8 years of that.
Okay, wait. So, and just to draw the parallels, Mormons have semi-annual general conferences where the top leaders come out and speak in this majestic conference center with the Mormon Tabernacle Choir. Now they've changed their name, but you get the picture. And tens of thousands of people in attendance. And it's always this semi-annual conference where everybody gets whipped up into excitement and what are the new temples that are going to get built and how many members do we have now? They've taken that away since membership is declining. But it's just this. So again, charismatic leaders coming out a couple times a year, told these big conferences to get everyone excited. That's something that's not only in religion, but in corporate America as well. But then also, this is where Stephen Hassan's bite model comes into play, because you're only hanging around people in your organization, and because the church does a really good job of tagging anything that isn't in support of the church as apostate or subversive or whatever it is. You can go for years and years and years, never hearing any negativity about the church, no truth about the church, totally unaware of the problems with the church, because you're either only hanging around Scientologists and or any information that isn't favorable has been banned. That limits the information that you get in your brain, which then limits the thoughts you're able to have about, I wonder whether or not this church is actually true. And then, of course, through the emotion of fear or excitement or saving the world or whatever it is, that hooks you in so that you have total commitment to the organization, even though there may be problems all around you, organizational problems, legal problems, historical problems, doctrinal or theological problems. Because of the way those organizations take control of your mind, the information that your mind gets, the relationships you have around you, you're oblivious to things that honestly the entire rest of the free world has access to and awareness of, but you within the organization are completely blind to it.
Exactly. And that's the point I was trying to get across. Exactly that. And so the struggles that I was having as a Sea Org member were not because of what I was hearing from the outside world, or because there were doubts and reservations being introduced into my thinking by people outside Scientology. I was having issues because of what was being done to me as a Sea Org member and Scientologist, right? Because now I'm seeing behind the curtain at a whole new level. And I'm seeing how Scientology organization is managed. I'm seeing how Scientology is actually run as a body, and not just at the city level, public facing front, but I'm seeing how the sausage is made, basically, right? And I'm seeing that it is a very unpleasant environment. It is not worker-oriented in any way. Hubbard actually wrote policies that say worker-oriented environments, i.e. unions and good pay and benefits and stuff. He's writing that that's bad. You know, that's the worker-oriented companies fail uniformly. And that you have to run a tight ship and a hard ship. And you know, he says he can make Captain Bligh look like a, you know, kindergarten teacher on a sunny day. You know, this is his attitude in running the Sea Org. And he said that people appreciate and want a rough, tough, ruthless environment of severe discipline. And that's what the Sea Org was. You know, if you weren't making, there was a period of time when they introduced these new books and lectures and stuff, and they were trying like crazy to sell them to everybody, where if you weren't making your sales quotas after like 15 minutes, it was drop and give me 20. You know, it was you go get hosed down in the garbage area because you're not making your quotas, you know, so you're going to go get what they call being thrown overboard. You know, back when Hubbard ran his little Navy off of actual boats, there was a period of time where they were overboarding people as a punishment. You weren't making your quotas. You got literally thrown off the side of the boat. And that was a disciplinary action. And so the equivalent of that on land, when you don't have a boat or a swimming pool, is you hose the person down, you know, and this was just something that goes on in the Sea Org, you know, and people just accept it because they're not getting enough work done and they think it's on them. It's their fault. And if they start questioning what's going on and go, hey, I don't want to be part of this anymore. This is crazy. I can't do this anymore. Then they get interrogated as to their crimes, their overts, right? What have you been doing that you don't want us to know about? Because clearly the only reason you want to leave is because of your own overts, not because of, you know, the abuse that we're raining down on you or the lack of pay or the fact you can't get a new shirt or a new pair of shoes. You know, literally, I watched Sea Org members walk around with shoes that were just flopping. The heels were so broken, you know, the sole was coming off their shoes, but they literally couldn't afford new shoes. This was the lifestyle, you know, and this went on for years and years. So I was willing to put a lot of it aside because of the, you know, cause and the purpose and all that. But after 8 years, I had enough. I couldn't take it anymore. And there was a very, very intense period of time where we were working really hard. I mean, way harder than even everything I've already described. And I hope I'm getting this across well. It's very, very hard to get this across in a way that's going to make a lot of sense to people because the Sea Org is not like anything else. I've never run into anything that really parallels the Sea Org. A monastic existence is kind of like the Sea Org, but except there's nothing quiet or sedate or calm about being in the Sea Org. That's, you know, the only thing that really parallels with the monastic comparison is the dedication and the isolation, but not the lifestyle. The lifestyle is much faster. And anyway, so during this really intense period.
Really quick. Did, number one, I never heard your reaction when L Ron Hubbard died. I know we're going way back in time now.
Oh, yeah.
We're going to loop it back. Do you remember when L Ron Hubbard died and how you felt?
Oh, yeah. Yep.
What was that like?
Well, I was still a public person. This was 1987. I was still in, or 86, sorry, January 1986. I was still in high school.
You were a junior.
Yeah. And my reaction was, I was sad because he had written me a letter when I was 6 years old. I'd written to him and he'd written me back, maybe 8 years old. And I never wrote him back. He asked me to write him back and I never did. Oh, no. And I always felt kind of guilty about that. I came to find out later the letter I had gotten was definitely not from him.
Yeah.
But I had thought it was because it had his signature on it, you know?
Okay. The other question I had is, while you were in the Sea Org, did you ever bump into David Miscavige?
Yeah, 3 times.
And what was that like while you bumped?
He's a very intense man. He's very short, by the way. But that wasn't particularly noteworthy at the time because he was such a big being to us, you know. We were always freaking out whenever there was the possibility that Miscavige was going to be on base. cleaning became like an all-night thing. You stay up all night cleaning and dusting and all that. We always had really clean facilities, but it was like super crazy clean. Everything had to be clean all the time. So cleaning was a real thing in the Sea Org. And every week we had a day where we would spend the whole morning cleaning the office, and I would do the shredding and stuff. Miscavige would come around and we would do all this cleaning to prepare for him. And then he would come around, and sometimes we would just sort of hear that he was on the other side of the base. And it's complicated to explain this, because in hindsight, I can see that I was afraid. But at the time, I didn't interpret my experience that way. I was afraid. I was terrified that he was going to show up, because there'd been, you hear rumors and stories of him ripping into people, or not the abuses that we hear about, with the hole and locking people up. We didn't know about any of that stuff. But we did not want to get a face ripping from David Miscavige. And if you got caught out, and the leader of the church, comes around to your desk and sees something wrong and says, "What the hell?" You don't want that. You don't want any part of that, right? You don't want all the trouble that's going to come from that. How many endless nights are you going to be scrubbing sinks and toilets because you didn't answer a telex or something, right? So I was terrified of him coming around, but I would interpret that experience at the time as being filled with awe or respect. These were the words that would come to my mind, because I couldn't allow myself to think, I'm afraid of him. There's just certain thoughts as a cult member you just can't let yourself have. And I didn't let myself have those thoughts. So, but everybody was on edge when he was around. Everybody was on pins and needles. And then when he left, everybody, you could feel the intensity come down. Oh, he's off base. Okay. Now there's no chance he's going to come around.
And was there a high level? So, in Mormonism, it's like when the prophet enters the room, everybody stands and
yes,
we sing "Hail to the Prophet," and there's just an incredible amount of reverence and kind of hero or leader worship within Mormonism. And I'm imagining, and I've seen the way that in those videos where Tom Cruise references LRH, and the way Miscavige is treated and applauded. There is just a high, intense level of leader worship. True?
Absolutely. Yes. Nobody thinks of David Miscavige as a godlike figure. They wouldn't put it that way. It's not a divinity. Right. It's that he's the hardest working Scientologist in the world.
Interesting.
That he has made sacrifices the rest of us could only dream of making. He is, the smartest, most genius guy. He got us tax exemption. He runs Scientology. He's the one making all the decisions. He's the head cheese, right? It's from that point of view more so than a divine reverence.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I wonder if the level of devotion and worship is still there, just for different reasons. It's not.
No, I'm trying to say that it is.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to just use different terminology to differentiate how it's slightly different also. Let me give you a story that'll demonstrate what I'm talking about, because there is a supernatural aspect to it. Again, like I said, this kind of stuff is hard to explain sometimes when you get into all the little gritty details. But I found out after I left that Miscavige would come around in the middle of the night when everybody was asleep. He would arrive on base. And he would go through the organizations when they're empty and there's nobody around, right? The only people who are awake on the base are the security guards or people who are maybe working really, really super late. But that's, sometimes that would come in fits and starts. Sometimes everybody would be up all night, and then other times everybody would be asleep, right? So he would come around and he would look in people's drawers. Like he would go to the captain's desk of one of the service organizations. I said there were 5 organizations in the big blue base. So he'd go to one of them and he'd open up the captain's drawer and he would see that something was off. And he'd close the drawer and he'd go out. And the next day, he'd come around doing an inspection, right? Nobody knew he'd been there the night before. No one. Maybe somebody in security knew because they have cameras everywhere. But otherwise, nobody had a clue. And he'd walk into the captain's office, and it'd be this big office, lots of desks, you know, people around. And he'd go, And he'd walk over to the captain's desk, and he'd look around, and he'd go, there's something not right here. And he'd go, and he'd open the drawer and go, what's this? Nobody knew he'd been there the night before and had scoped that out. So everybody in the room literally thinks he just has this perceptive ability to just find things that are wrong in an area and order it to be corrected. He created this reputation by doing this kind of simple bullshit that none of us ever suspected he would do, right? And this is how you get this sort of supernatural quality to him and a real fear that he's going to know something about you that he couldn't possibly know. You see what I mean?
Yeah. That reminds me, I heard this tale that Napoleon Bonaparte used to find out the name of like one of his soldiers, you know, wherever he was like inspecting a line of soldiers. And he would walk up to one of the soldiers and address them by name. And everybody else would go, oh my gosh, he must have a photographic memory. He must know the name of every soldier here. When in reality, it was just a ploy to fool people, to make him think that he cared and knew them when he really didn't. So
exactly.
This is the type of thing charlatans do. And Joseph Smith did a million things like this to be able to fool and honestly sometimes con people out of things, unfortunately.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, you look at it now from outside and you go, well, that's obvious and silly and stupid. But when you're in it, you don't think about stuff like that. You don't think, oh, he snuck around in here in the middle of the night last night. That doesn't even enter your brain as a possibility of what's going on. You're much more apt to assign supernatural properties to him because, you know, you believe in Thetans and ESP and stuff like that. So that was, you know, it was little things like that he would sort of build a reputation on. And we were all freaked out by him. And there was one time when I went to Clearwater. Mm-hmm.
Oh, go ahead. Keep going.
I went to Clearwater one time in my capacity as the assistant technical aide to get this briefing from Miscavige that went on for three straight days. And that was intense, man. That was pretty scary because he sounded kind of pissed. And he was briefing us on this stuff that he had to figure out and do and blah, blah, blah. And it was all these other people's jobs and they had fallen down on the job and hadn't done their job. And so he had to step in. And now he was briefing us all about how, you know, he had discovered all this new stuff that was going to revolutionize Scientology training. And that was in 1996. So that was pretty early on. And he had started remaking Scientology in his own image at this point, right? But it wasn't real obvious. It was a very gradual sort of thing. And at least as far as we could tell, it was. And anyway, so yeah, I did that for 8 years until I finally got up one night after this really intense period of about 3 or 4 months where I'd gotten very little sleep. I'd been very overloaded with other people's work dumped on me because they had gone off to this special project that Miscavige was personally, you know, sort of running. And I was left to carry the load for everybody. And so I was really worn out, really exhausted. And one night I just couldn't take it anymore. And I just got up and I walked out the back door. And I walked from Hollywood to downtown LA to Pasadena, where I grew up. I knew Pasadena. And I just needed to get away for a while. And I was kind of I had lost it. I was not in a good place. And I left my wife. I left everything. I just literally got up at midnight and I just walked out the door. I was still in my uniform, you know. I crashed in a hotel in Pasadena for like 3 days. I just slept like for 2 straight days. I was so exhausted. And then I spent another day or two kind of wandering around, getting my bearings, chilling out, kind of relaxing. I didn't really have a lot of money. I think I'd taken about $180 or something out of the bank. That was about the total amount of money I had, period. And then I called my parents, and they were still ostensibly Scientologists at this point. They had not, left the church yet. I obviously hadn't left the church yet. I was considering what to do. And I actually talked to my mom in a video. I did an interview with her, and we actually talked about this whole time period in a lot of detail, because this was a chance that they had to get me out, or I could have gotten out. But they, and my mom was trying to be very careful in talking to me, because she knew that if I decided to go back, and she had told me or advised me, oh, thank God you're out, come home now, I'll pay for your ticket, let's go. She was afraid that if she did that and I changed my mind, that I would have to disconnect from her. And she didn't want that. She was thinking really long term, right? So she just said, look, I'll support you in anything you want to do. She was trying to be very circumspect. And in hindsight, I wished, and I told her this when we had our conversation, I said, I wish you had been a bit stronger about it. But I then understood why she had been concerned.
Well, she wasn't a believer. She wasn't a believer at that point.
At this point, she had basically given up on Scientology, but she never admitted that to me, because she was trying
scared she'd lose you.
Yeah, she was trying to preserve the relationship.
Wow.
So,
and that's the sure sign of a cult. If parents or children are worried that they're going to lose the relationship with their parent or children if they're honest about their disbelief.
Exactly.
That is the sure sign of the cult.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, and
by the way, you didn't mention that you got married. Did you have kids?
No.
You didn't learn anything about the fact that you got married.
No, I did get married. Actually, the first couple months I was in the Sea Org, I got married. Because you can't have sex in the Sea Org until you're married. The Sea Org is where there are rules about sex and stuff. When I answered before, I was talking about overall Scientology. But in the Sea Org, no premarital sex, no heavy petting, no kids at all, period. No kids are allowed. If you get pregnant, you have to have an abortion, or you're going to get kicked out of the Sea Org. And if it happens more than once, at this point, I've learned they make the guy get a vasectomy. So they're hardcore about no kids in the Sea Org. They already had a period of time where they were raising kids, and they did a god-awful job of it, and they just abused a whole generation of kids, and it was just awful.
Meaning
and they had so much public backlash from that, they said, okay, no more kids.
Do you mean physical and sexual abuse, or what?
All of it. Everything you can imagine that you could do to kids happened to those kids in the Sea Org. And they were physically abused. They were emotionally abused. They were miseducated. They were mistreated. They were in roach and ant-infested quarters. I mean, it was bad. It was really bad. This was in the 70s, and most especially in the 80s and early 90s. So, like I said, a whole generation of Sea Org kids grew up in the Sea Org, and they were raised by the person who could be spared, in facilities that were not for kids. They had no education set up. They didn't have anything. It was god awful.
Yeah.
So in the late 80s, they said, what's that? Yeah. Oh, no. So in the late 80s, they said, okay.
No more kids. No more kids.
Yeah, no more kids. And by 1995, when I got in, right away, they said to us, they issued this written policy that said, absolutely no more kids at all. If you're in the Sea Org and you have kids, you're out of the Sea Org. And, I'd been planning on having kids with my wife. We had gotten married. She loved kids. We were going to have kids at some point. But then this came down, and we went, well, I guess we're not having kids anymore.
Right.
Later on, during the course of those 8 years that I was in management, she was also in management. We did get pregnant. And I've said this, I've talked about this whole thing, but to my shame, I convinced her to get an abortion. We really should have left the Sea Org, but we stayed in and thought we were fighting the good fight and saving the world. And we didn't have any choice. It was not, we were being yelled and screamed at, you are getting an abortion. It wasn't like, you guys figure it out. It was, you motherfuckers better go get an abortion. And if I hear anything else about it, you guys are going to be in a world of hurt. That was how we were being talked to about it. So, so anyway, so yeah, we got the abortion.
Did you feel like you loved her?
Oh yeah, absolutely. She was a great person. My wife was Sunny. Her name was Sunny. She was a very nice person, nice disposition. I definitely loved her. I thought that she was the one for me. The relationship, my relationship with my ex-wife is kind of separate from my whole Sea Org experience. I mean, the Sea Org is not the place to have a loving, nurturing relationship. It's not about relationships in the Sea Org. Everything is secondary to the Sea Org. So people are ordered to get divorces in the Sea Org. That happens all the time. If you get moved from one echelon to a higher echelon, you're encouraged to divorce your spouse because if they can't move up with you, they're an anchor on you. They're holding you back. They're an albatross around your neck. That's the attitude about it. Marriage is not very, sacrosanct in the Sea Org.
Interesting. Wow,
yeah,
that's fascinating. And in the Leah Remini series, we haven't mentioned enough. Oh, sorry, we haven't mentioned enough about Leah Remini, but her series on Scientology is breathtaking and powerful, I think. And I think you're a part of it in some way. But I remember one of those stories about the girl that was forced to have an abortion, and that's just crazy, right?
It's beyond crazy, and it's routine there. It's not an uncommon thing, Yeah. Because birth control is catch as catch can, right? You go down to Planned Parenthood, you pick up free condoms, or the women get birth control pills, and it's on you to make all that work. It's not like you're being afforded a lot of time off or liberty to deal with that. You're just expected to make it happen.
Yeah.
The attitude, here's something else that'll help you understand the Sea Org. There's a policy, it's an actual written policy in Scientology called the Supreme Test of a Thetan. And the supreme test of a Thetan, according to L Ron Hubbard, is his ability to make things go right. So you are judged by how much you can solve problems, how many problems you can solve, how many situations you can deal with. And the more situations you can deal with, or the more problems you can solve, the more you're given. There are very few laurels to rest on in the Sea Org. There are very few attaboys. There are very few rewards. There's a whole lot of penalties. And this is not something you're told when you go in. You think it's a different place than it is when you join the Sea Org. I had no idea what I was getting into. I thought I was joining a higher level group that was dedicated to saving the planet, and that we were going to be doing L Ron Hubbard's work even better and in better conditions and with better results. But what I found was it was like Santa Barbara on hyper steroids, and there was this call center environment, this boiler pressure kind of pressure on your head all the time. You could get woken up at 2:30 in the morning randomly for any reason whatsoever to go have to deal with some emergency on your post. And, it's not like you could just slam the door in the guy's face and say, fuck off, come back tomorrow morning. You're living on a Sea Org base. If you screw around with these people, security will come and drag you out. And then you're going to be sitting and holding cans and asking, being asked sharp and pointed questions about your masturbatory practices or whatever else you've been up to that they think is immoral because you're bucking the system.
And you
don't get to buck the system.
Was there a brig? Could you be imprisoned if you disobeyed?
I will get to that.
Okay.
I'm about to tell you all about that.
All right. I'm excited. Okay.
Yeah, here we go. Because after those 8 years, after I took off for those 3 days and then came back, because I decided after talking to my parents, okay, I guess I should come back. So I did. And I got taken off of my post in management by my own choice. I was like, I'm not doing that anymore. I don't care what you guys do to me. I'm done with that. And so I got reposted eventually as a salesperson. And I sold the OT levels to people, for about 6 months. And I got pretty good at it, actually. It was a relief from the work I'd been doing. I was like, oh my God, I got to I got to get away from all this management stuff. So selling people Scientology services seemed very, very easy in comparison. And it kind of was. And I was able to kind of get along with, individual people. It wasn't all this like, crazy pressure to send telexes to orgs that weren't going to even read them, much less follow my orders and report compliance, right? It was a much easier thing to sit down and talk to somebody and try to convince them to give you money. And anyway, like I said, I got fairly decent at it. There was an incredible amount of pressure to get money in, but because I was new at it, I was kind of being given a little bit of latitude to learn the job and kind of apprentice under other salespeople and stuff. And I only did it for 6 months. So I wasn't really there long enough on that post to get into a whole lot of trouble. As I got better and better at doing it, my statistics were going up and up and up every week. So I was doing okay at this job, so much so that they promoted me to work in the technical area of the advanced organization. And I'm trying to avoid all the terminology here, but basically I got put into a job that was very similar to my job in Santa Barbara, except I was overseeing the delivery of people getting onto the OT levels, the confidential stuff. I wasn't exposed to any of the confidential information. I was just in the gateway for people to get to that confidential information, and I was the gatekeeper there. So I did that for a while, but I never really did get over this burnout that had happened a year before, and I just felt inside. I just felt broken. I felt really, really broken. And I wasn't able to piece myself back together as I had been able to do for all those years. So I ended up getting into this kind of weird phone sex relationship with this woman who had been a Sea Org member, but had now had a baby and been sent off to Las Vegas to work out there with her husband. There had been a period of time where when you got pregnant, you weren't kicked out of the Sea Org, you were sent down to one of the city level churches, and you ended up working there. And then they canceled that. That was what they canceled in 96 when I came in the Sea Org. And they said, look, we're not sending you to a class 5 org, to a city level church. We're just kicking you out of the Sea Org entirely. So this woman had been one of those people who had ended up at a church, at a city level church. She had been a friend of mine, and we started talking on the phone. And like I said, I was a pretty broken person, and I'm not trying to excuse my behavior. It was immoral. I was married. I was having a really rocky time with my wife. I did love her. I had extraordinary feelings for her, but I was broken, in a way that it's very hard for me to easily describe. And there's burnout, there's exhaustion, and then there was where I was at. And I was faking it. I was trying to make it. I was trying to make it work. I was trying to pass that supreme test of a Thetan, make it go right. Make your life go right. Make your post go right. Just do it. You're not given a lot of direction in the Sea Org as to how to do things. You're just told to make it happen. So I was trying to manifest a good post and a good life, and I was failing. I wasn't doing good. So I had this outlet with this old friend of mine. We started talking on the phone, and then we were talking more, and then we were talking more. And this was in the middle of the day. Like, I was pretending to work, but I was actually just bullshitting with her on the phone, right? And this went on for a few months, and then it started getting kind of kinky and sort of sexual, and then we started having phone sex. And this was basically a high crime in the Sea Org. Okay, I know in the big wide world this isn't a huge deal, but for me at the time, it was adultery. It was the equivalent of adultery, right? I was cheating on my wife, and it was really not good. So I felt really guilty about it. I knew I was piling on more guilt and more trouble. I wasn't solving anything about my brokenness. I was just making it worse. And I basically put a stop to it. This was about, I don't know. I think it started in like June or July. And I think by August or September, October, I was like, okay, look, we got to stop this. This isn't good for you. It's not good for me. You're married. You got kids. I'm married. I'm in the Sea Org. We really need to stop doing this. And I stopped calling her, and I stopped taking her calls, and it just kind of fizzled out. And I was pretty happy that I had done that, because it was the morally right thing to do. And I started repairing things with my wife. But then one day, I went into an auditing session, right? And I was going to get a counseling session. And I confessed to what I had done. I offered it up. I didn't even wait for the e-meter to start doing its thing and stuff. I said, okay, well, I got some stuff I got to tell you. And I'd already ended it. I'd already dealt with it. It was a done deal. But I hadn't confessed it. I hadn't said anything about it. And it was awful and evil what I did. So I say, okay, well, I did this thing and I feel really bad about it. And here's what happened. And the guy writes it all down like they do with every single auditing session. He takes extensive notes of all the stuff I did. And he ends up writing a report. And I went down to the ethics area right after the auditing session because I knew I was going to get in trouble. And I went down and I said, I have to tell you guys, something I've been up to or that I had been up to. I stopped it, but they didn't care about the stopping it part. They only cared about the fact that I had done that. And of course, this blows up. My wife freaks out. I'm dejected and despondent and horrified. And I was in the gutter. Now I'm in the sub gutter, I'm as far as my self image goes. And so they did a justice action on me, a court, and or it's actually called a committee of evidence. And they determined that I needed to go to the RPF. And I agreed.